Zuzanna and Shweta to think about some examples of how they've applied eco-mutualist and eco-leadership thinking in their practice. So, Zuzanna, do you want to start? You're in Krakow, I believe, and do you want to tell people a bit about your work?
Sure, yeah. Um, it was interesting now to listen to it and think about the work we've done in retrospect, because I've co-founded an organization in Poland in 2021. We've been working as a group of people before, but we set up an official organization in 2021, and in 2022, suddenly, not suddenly, but we have not planned for it, the war in Ukraine escalated, and we were faced with a humanitarian crisis. So planning a small organization with a small growth, suddenly we had to face like rapid growth, and this adaptability that's so much, everywhere. Simon, on every point you touch, there is this aspect of adapting to change. So that's what we faced from early on, throughout, basically. uh, and I think that this approach, I mean, adaptability as such, but also everything you talked about, is the only way to face a humanitarian crisis, or to work in the third sector efficiently. um, when you're faced with a crisis, like the first days of the war, we set up a help center in Krakow on the first day of the war, and the second day it was operational. So it was very, very quick acting. Government was way behind that, right? And that's only possible with that eco leadership approach. As a co-founder with the other people on the board, we wouldn't be able to do it ourselves, or with top-down leadership. um, it had to be done through distributed leadership, right? So we had to trust in the team we had, and we didn't have to, but that was our approach. So it worked because the leadership was distributed, and with that trust to others. Another thing that's, I think, very important, and as well, you know touches on this partnerships interdependency, that I think, from what I've heard for a while now, talking to people from humanitarian sector, it's quite unique to our situation, to Krakow specifically in Poland, because 2 weeks before the war broke out, maybe 10 days, but yeah, that, like, 10 to 2 weeks before, the government, the municipality, set up a meeting for NGOs, local NGOs in Krakow, saying that there is a possibility that the war is gonna broke out, like, full escalated war in Ukraine, and there might be millions of people coming through. At this point, they were talking 700,000, but it turned out to be a couple of millions, right? But this kind of preparedness, and also preparing for it in the partnership, municipality with NGOs, I was positively surprised. And I think it set up a very good pattern, because we already had this established. We haven't done much in this maybe 2 meetings we had before war, but the connections started, and that the way we proceeded was very much dependent on this meeting that didn't do much, but the fact that we met, and we knew that we all want to get involved, and we will all work, and we knew the faces, we knew the organizations. uh, so after the war broke out, we all set up groups, working groups within the city, involving NGOs or people, activists, and people were grouped, and it wasn't one organization working in one sector. We were specifically very much involved in housing, but there was people or organizations kind of divided into sections. So this interconnectedness, I think, helped us respond quite efficiently to the crisis in those first days, when it was quite chaotic. Of course, I mean, any crisis is, right? So, I mean, I have many examples, but I think I'm not gonna say the whole story of what's been going on, but one more maybe example, of how the system change, the technology affects us, and how we need to be adaptive in the way we think and involve people that might not be, our first thought. So we've always been working with minorities. Our goal was always to um, we were saying give voice to the excluded, but then we even changed that language because it's like it felt a little bit, still building the hierarchy. But the fact was that we were hiring people from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of minority groups, and at some point, being in Krakow, Poland, Polish people were the minority in the organization. But one group that we started helping, that really was important because they did not receive a lot of help, were Roma refugees from Ukraine. They faced discrimination in Ukraine and in Poland. And we hired a person who has never worked on a computer in her life. She was from the Roma community. She has not finished primary school. Her CV was, I'm a housewife, I have 3 children. So it's probably out of the box, right? And I don't think she would be hired by an INGO following the bureaucracy and the standards. But she did such a fantastic job. And she changed people's lives, of course, but she changed the way people worked. She changed the way, other Polish people worked in the organization, and she changed their perspective on the Roma community. I feel like this one person that we hired made such a tremendous difference in the lives of, even Polish people, that I'm like so happy with this decision that we've done that. So I think that's a good example of
That's a great example, Susanna. Thank you for sharing. I visited Poland and visited your organization and many others, and those ecosystems were ecosystems of radical change. It was just so interesting to see how there'd be a gap in a service, and then someone would create a school, someone would create healthcare, and that last example you gave about unleashing leadership. We talk about unleashing leadership, and that's precisely it. You see someone and you give them the opportunity, and you don't know, it's an act of faith. You hope, and then they step into that space, and the amount of talent and potential there is unleashed, and it makes a huge difference. And so often we don't recognize that. So often we kind of just wait for leadership from the top. So that's a lovely example. Thank you. Shweta, do you want to say something about your experience in India?
Hi, thanks, Simon. Susanna, that was lovely hearing all those examples. So I'm going to share a little bit about the India story. Last year, Save the Children India went through a sudden, quite a major crisis. We lost our FCRA license, which is our which regulates our foreign contribution. And as an INGO, while we are registered in India, but we were predominantly dependent on foreign funding. So about 75% of our funding was foreign and only 25% domestic. Bank accounts got frozen. Overnight, our programs just came to a halt because, again, this was like a government regulation. So we couldn't even, and the government is so strict on all the compliances related to FCRA that once your license is withheld, you can't even use a foreign funded asset. So suddenly, overnight, it was a major crisis. And we had to let go of a lot of people. So I'm going to kind of focus on, the bit on staff separation during this crisis time. And at that point of time, me and the then acting HR director, Chitto, we both were in between this eco-leadership course. We were halfway through. I, by the way, was lead, and I still lead governance and organization development at Save the Children India. And we just had to kind of consciously, unconsciously, I think we just drew on so many principles of eco-leadership. And it was literally a case study unfolding in action. We had to let go of almost about 50% of our staff. And the kind of, which is really unfortunate, but we kind of tried to hold on to philosophy of the way we let go of staff. There should be humaneness. It should be done with dignity and utmost respect. We got together and we put together a whole lot of, support for the staff who's going to be transitioning out of our organization. So there were, for the bottom level of the staff who were frontline workers whose pay was also not very high, we kind of gave them a severance package over and above whatever we were due to. So about a month's additional salary. We started offering psychosocial support to a lot of staff. We went out and started helping them with recruitment. We would look at their, CVs, get them to have interviews, mock interviews, connecting them with recruitment consultants. Did a lot of that. The leadership and a lot of other people in the organization who were staying back kind of got onto a call tree where we were regularly calling them up. And we just kind of realized that, there was, and all this wouldn't have been possible with just, going with business as usual. We had to tap into our ecosystemic resources. Given the fact that we were already, crunched with resources, it wasn't that we could pay for getting psychosocial support for others, or we could pay to have a recruitment agency on board or someone who would handhold people through the development of their CV or LinkedIn. So we just tapped out and reached out into the ecosystem. We kind of asked people around who would be willing to come and support us. There were civil society organizations who just came up and helped us, offered working in the psychosocial space. They just offered us to, have group sessions, one-on-one counseling sessions. There were these recruitment agencies who we were already working with. I mean, they offered and just gave us so much of pro bono support. So it was really incredible, the kind of support we found in the ecosystem. So I think that, and then another concept, what we really landed up using, again, which Simon will speak again, I'm sure a lot about, is again this leadership from the edge. I mean, our organization traditionally was very hierarchical based. I mean, we've got a very definitive structure. But during this crisis time, because we had to let go of, there weren't a particular class of people, a particular hierarchy who were going. We were forced to let go from all hierarchies because there was either a particular position or a role was becoming redundant, or it was a completely 100% foreign funded, role which we couldn't sustain. Or some of the roles we were even kind of just getting people to either multitask or stretch and take on combined responsibilities, additional responsibilities. So I think here at that point of time, we just saw so much of leadership emergence in the organization. And it's been a year we've been grappling up with this crisis. We're touchwood happy to report pretty stable now. But, our top level leadership or people who've come up are really, I wouldn't even say a lot of them are not only from second line, but they were like third line also. I mean, people who've just stepped up, and it's not even we were giving out responsibility to others. People just stepped up, took responsibilities, and it was like a dominoes effect. One person doing it, somebody else saw, and then they emulated. So I think there's a lot of value in just all these kind of modeling behaviors.
Shweta, thank you so much for sharing that. I think what Shweta and Susanna are sharing is to show that eco leadership and these eco mutualist ways, they're not sort of some top-down idea from some university. They're through kind of research and practice on the ground. It's a ground-up way, and these things are happening. And what we're trying to add is to amplify the good practice already existing. It is not kind of saying this is a brand new kind of way of doing things. It's saying if you do this, then it will it can amplify good practice. How can we support Shweta's good practice, Susanna's good practice? How can we kind of enable it and kind of work with them to amplify this and spread this good practice elsewhere and learn from each other? It's very much about horizontal learning from each other. As Shweta said, it's like once you unleash leadership, it goes viral. It's like it's contagious, and people see it and they say, I want a piece of that as well. That's a good way to work, and I've got potential. And people become willing to speak into spaces rather than kind of be told what to do. Susanna and Shweta, any final words before we put people into groups? Any final thoughts or
Maybe that it's not all, we can't just maybe present it through the good lens. I mean, there is work to do to achieve that, and it's not. I'm sure that for Shweta or for myself, it did not just happen so easily and so smoothly. Some things come naturally, but then I still had to face my own fears when I was distributing leadership, and when facing the crisis, and when me as a board member with the legal responsibility, I had very little control over what was happening in the help center. So there is things we have to work with as individuals to achieve that.
Thanks. I just have one piece of advice to everybody who's going to now going out and become practitioners of this eco leadership. I think don't look into things of seeing a big change or something big's going to happen. This is where you identify eco leadership. It's really in the small things. Is what I have noticed, what I have learned. There is another cohort of 1 or 2 members in our in the organization who did this eco leadership. And again, offline, whenever we talk about that, it's those little changes which kind of become big. It's nothing. You're not going to have anything where overnight, okay, the organization structure changes, the hierarchy is gone, we're a flat structure, but it's just in that little ways of working. So just keep a lookout into little pieces which you can influence, which will make a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Shweta. Yeah, that's very important that it is all about small changes leading to big changes. And my experience of that is that it's actually very liberating, because quite often we think, oh, the top has to change or the whole system has to change, and we wait for that change and we get depressed because it doesn't happen. When actually we can be getting on with these small changes, and these small changes, they amplify, they grow and they grow. And that's how the system will change. That's how the whole humanitarian ecosystem will change it in the end. And to Zuzana's point, she's absolutely right. It's not just a rosy. So there are some books on creating leaderless organizations, and they paint this rosy picture that if you take away hierarchy, everyone's happy. That's not my experience at all. There's a real struggle there. There's our own mindsets, how we get stuck in patterns of working. There's real resistances, people with power who don't want to give away power. There's a whole host of challenges to overcome. But there's a richness in it as well. So thank you both very much. It's been really rich sharing.